Okay, so The Devil All the Time is pretty much God Works in Mysterious Ways the movie, and it has a lot to unpack from it. Throughout this video, we'll be breaking down the symbolism of the piece, the true meaning behind it, and also its ending. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check out the movie yet, then I highly recommend that you check out now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day, and please drop a thumbs up as it massively helps us out. As always, this is the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition. Now let's get into The Devil All the Time. Okay, so the title of the film very much ties into the religious aspects that we see laced throughout the piece. Set primarily on the Bible Belt of America in West Virginia, we watch as interconnecting stories all join together to form one overarching narrative that feels like a true American Gothic horror. Though the film feels extremely bleak, almost relentless in its depiction of life and death, it also ends with a glimmer of hope that suggests there might be light at the end of the tunnel. Initially, we join a World War II veteran named Willard who's just returned from war. After his wife is diagnosed with cancer, he becomes obsessed with prayer and forces their son to do this almost every day down at a makeshift log, which he views as his church. In the book and the movie, it's said that he prayed so much to God that to his son it seemed like he fought the devil all the time. However, the movie goes far beyond that. Throughout, we join several characters that are constantly tempted by power, sex, and their underlying desires, which they as characters either fight or give into. Pretty much every person in the film feels like they could give in at any time, and because of this, you guessed it, they're fighting the devil all the time. Now, Willard is a fascinating character, and arguably he goes on one of the most tragic arcs in the film. After he witnesses a crucified and skinned soldier during the war, his perception of religion and God is altered significantly, and initially he turns his back on his faith. It's difficult to discern whether the film actually states if God exists or not, and one could argue that the interconnecting stories are either coincidence or somewhat divine intervention. On a second watch, something that stuck out to me massively was that Willard's mother promised God that if he returned from war, that she would make him marry another churchgoer named Helen Hatton. Ultimately, this doesn't happen, and in retrospect, the majority of the tragedies in the film would have been avoided if she just kept up her end of the bargain. When Willard enters a diner at the beginning of the movie, a man named Carl almost takes his seat, but he offers it up to him instead and takes another. Carl is then served by a woman that would go on to become his wife, and together the pair commit horrendous crimes. Again, one could argue that had Carl been a mere second earlier, then this would have never happened, and the simple moment of the seat switch and him taking her photograph have massive ramifications for the movie. The film itself is narrated by Donald Ray Pollock, the original author of the book, and in some ways he feels like the voice of God, aware of all that is going on. In a letter sent out along with early access to the movie, the film's director Antonio Campos stated that he wanted Pollock to feel like the voice of the creator that knew all of the ins and outs of the characters. Whether you see this as the voice of God or not, I think it's a nice little detail that some omnipresent person could be overseeing everything and letting us know how it connects. Now, as for Willard, he just can't look at a cross without seeing that soldier. However, he slowly turns back to religion, hoping to get right with his maker before something bad happens. Unfortunately, it does, and as we mentioned, his wife's health begins to wane. Willard convinces himself that if he offers up enough blood, it will save her life, and he kills his dog, eventually pinning it up similar to the crucified soldier in the hopes that it will save her. The book goes far beyond this, with Willard killing more and more animals in the hopes that he will eventually offer up enough blood to save her life. She dies anyway, and Willard ends his life the night of her funeral. A sheriff named Bodecker investigates the death after Arvin raises the alarm, and this location becomes central to the film's ending. Arvin goes to live with his grandmother and another orphan named Lenora. Now, it's revealed that Lenora is actually the child of Helen, who, on the day that she was introduced to Willard, was swept off her feet by a travelling preacher named Dudley. Roy and his brother. Roy is a religious fanatic that even pours live spiders on his face during sermons to prove his devotion, and eventually, after becoming bitten, he locks himself away before coming to the conclusion that God has a purpose for him. He believes that he can resurrect the dead, and kills his wife before screaming to the Lord to bring her back. This is similar to Willard in some respects, and Roy is later killed by Carl and his wife Sandy, who we discover have started to pick up hitchhikers before murdering them. Now, had Carl not given the seat to Willard, then Willard would not have been served by the woman who would go on to become his future wife. Without her in his mind, he would have likely gone to the church and ended up with Helen. Roy wouldn't have killed Helen, and then as Carl hadn't met Sandy, he wouldn't have killed Roy. It's kinda mind-blowing seeing all of these pieces fit together, and this butterfly effect leaves Lenora and Arvin growing up together without parents. However, one thing that they do have, which was passed on from them, is their faith. Campos stated that in his letter, one of the things that he inherited from his parents was religion. He said that at times he feels very conflicted over this, and during the film myself, I was wondering how so many of the characters could still believe in God after all they'd been through. Everyone is tested at one point, and most try to endure through it, but often, if not always, they turn to a darker path. Nowhere is this exemplified more than in Sheriff Bodecker, played by Sebastian Stan. He knows something's up with his sister, but he turns a blind eye to it due to wishing to be re-elected. He puts the temptation of power above doing the right thing, and even kills people in the hopes of retaining the position of sheriff in this tiny, pretty meaningless town. Lenora is also tempted by a preacher, played by Robert Pattinson. The predator preys on young girls, using their dedication to their faith against them. He's an absolutely despicable character, who in fact gives in to the devil and his own desires, whilst preaching to stand against temptation. I have to say, Pattinson is almost unrecognisable in the role, and with Tenet under his belt, this and the upcoming Batman movie, the guy is on a stratospheric rise. His mannerisms feel completely alien, and he nails the contradictions of a man who's preaching about sin, all whilst committing it. Nowhere is this cemented more than in his introduction, in which he openly embarrasses Lenora and Arvin's grandmother for bringing chicken livers. He hoards them for himself, saying that he will bear the burden of this poor person's food, when really we know it's because he liked them. The character is a complete contradiction, lying through his teeth, and I feel like Pattinson absolutely nails the gravitas in the performance. Lenora has bags put over her head by bullies, and she comes to believe that she's ugly. Thus, when a man shows her some sort of attention, she of course laps it up. I think that a lot of institutions, not only the church, prey on this kind of mentality, and they seek out the vulnerable in order to support them. I grew up in quite a religious family, and of course know that the church isn't bad on the whole, but we do know that there exists horror stories in which evil people have been able to ascend. Lenora goes to the preacher Preston with news of her pregnancy, and he suggests that she gets rid of it, denying any knowledge of what they did together. Lenora goes to hang herself, but at the last second she changes her mind, realising that it's all a mistake. However, it's too late and she slips, killing herself in the process. This really sparks Arvin off, who stalks Preston, unearthing his crimes. Like his father, Arvin is haunted by the idea that with religion comes his undertone of despair, and this is cemented by him looking at the same image of the crucifixion that his dad did many years before. He shoots the character in his church with the gun that Hitler reportedly used in his last moments, and clearly the character's actions have been influenced by his father, who imbued him with the knowledge that there must always be punishment for wrongdoings. He says that he has to kill a preacher because he has to, and not because he wants to, which hammers home his mentality. When Arvin was a boy, he was given a black eye by bullies, and this eye for an eye mentality ends up with a lot of characters metaphorically losing their sight. Now, one thing that I think the movie hammers home is the idea that doing things in someone's name just because they tell you to does not mean it's the right thing. Roy kills his wife after believing that God told him to do it, and on the other end of this is Sandy, who participates in murders because her husband Carl tells her to. Carl should almost be viewed as a personification of death, and it's only in death that he feels a higher power. He views murder as its own religion, and Sandy, though initially committed to it, begins to turn away. However, she never walks away and always finds a reason to go back, and this eventually leads to her death. Also, yeah, that scene, you know the one I'm talking about with the filleted sausage, that's gonna haunt my imagination for the next 50 years or so. I'm never eating a bratwurst again. Anyway, on the road they pick up Arvin, who's fleeing from the law after killing Preston. They try their usual routine, but after he spots Carl's gun, he realises something is up. Arvin is of course on the run as it is, and is likely in a heightened paranoid state, and thus he quickly realises what's going on. Sandy too has her doubts and even fantasises about running away with Arvin. However, he acts too fast and kills Carl. He holds his gun to Sandy, who holds one back, and it's revealed that due to Carl not trusting Sandy because of her actions earlier in the film, he'd loaded it with blanks. This gave her the illusion of power, even though she didn't really have it, and in some ways it once more mirrors Roy, who believed that he had a certain ability, but it was completely one-sided. Arvin discovers the photographs that Carl had kept of his victims, and he flees. The pair's bodies are found and Bodecker burns the evidence of their misdeeds, further taking the choice of hiding things instead of doing the right thing. The exposure of these crimes could have given a lot of families closure, but Bodecker hides them and attempts to go after Arvin. He correctly guesses that Arvin would return to his father's quote-unquote church, and the character does this to bury their dog, which is a promise that he made as a child. He accepts that the dog needed to go with his mother, but this moment is quickly cut short. Bodecker arrives and Arvin manages to kill him. And you know what, Sebastian Stan looks a lot like Mark Hamill. Yeah, definitely just cast him in a Luke Skywalker movie or something, please. It's tragic because all of this could have been avoided had the sheriff arrested his sister, but instead he gave in to his desire for power. Arvin is picked up on the road and he finally gets a chance to rest. Now, though we don't know what happens to the character for definite, he does get a moment of clarity in which he sees his entire life almost laid out in an instant. There are some brief cuts that actually demonstrate what will happen to Arvin, and this ending should sort of be seen as his life flashing before his eyes. We realise that the police discover the truth about Bodecker and also Preston, which Arvin hopes will show that he had his reasons if he ever got caught. Now, whilst this is primarily seen as him imagining what will happen, I actually think that it demonstrates the truth of the situation. The letter from the director ends by saying that even if you don't get a happy ending, there's always potential for a new beginning, and I think that is very much exemplified here. The person that picks up Arvin is very similar looks-wise to Jesus, and he could be seen as the character's salvation, taking him away from this pain and misery, which is cemented by the character looking back at the life that he's leaving behind. Going forward, we get flashes of him in Vietnam, as well as a child approaching an older man at a car. I actually think that these are visions of Arvin's life after the events of the movie, and that he will go on to be happy. This means that, even with all this bad, some good will actually come out of it, and though the movie was very bleak, things always have the potential to end in a good way. Life isn't really about endings, it's more about new beginnings, and seeing Arvin ride off into the sunset almost with the hopes of a better life lets us as an audience know that no matter how dark things seem, there's always tomorrow. That ends the movie on a high note, but what did I think of the film overall? Well, personally I loved it, and though a lot of criticism about the piece centers around how few jokes there are, I can't really see them fitting in well here at all. The tone is supposed to be a certain way, and I think this would feel very jarring if people were busting out one-liners whilst the events play out. Every actor here is bringing their A-game, and for a lot of them, it feels like some of the meatiest roles that they've ever had the opportunity to really sink their teeth into. The film feels very No Country for Old Men, and it's an authentic portrayal of human emotion that I think elevates it above many. If you like gritty, suspenseful thrillers, then this is a movie that you need to check out. Though it's not for everyone, I still greatly enjoyed The Devil All the Time, and definitely recommend that you check it out and make up your own mind if you haven't already. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film, so make sure you comment below and let me know. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Homelander, which is going to be linked at the end. We go over the main character in The Boys, so it's definitely worth checking out if you want to know more. We're also giving away a free copy of the Christopher Nolan collection, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. The winner is going to be chosen at random on the 30th of September, the set will be shipped out from then, so yeah, make sure you get involved. Now, if you want to support the channel and get to see content early, then please consider clicking the join button below. You can also come chat to us on the Discord server linked in the description, or at Heavy Spoilers on Twitter. Thanks for making it until the end of the video, you've been the best, I've been David Ishard, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.